Hi and welcome to another Watch Geek video. In my King Seiko 45 review, I mentioned the Astronomical Observatory Chronometer competitions and said that it's a story for a whole new video. Well, this is that video. In the past, marine travel heavily relied on timekeeping, as courses were plotted and followed by measuring speed and time of moving in a certain direction. Because of this, accuracy of those timekeeping devices not only meant a more efficient travel, but a safer one. Astronomical observatories were in charge of inspecting these marine-grade chronometers, and competitions first started in order to increase accuracy through competitive racing between clockmakers. This tradition was transferred to wristwatches as well, where winning was more about proving your band is at the cutting edge of what was mechanically possible. These competitions were very similar to Formula One racing in the car world, and just like Formula One, these movements were specially prepared for the competitions, with only one primary objective: to be as accurate as possible, while disregarding everything else. Reliability, longevity, and serviceability were completely ignored, as they were not important for movements that will never be offered for sale to the public. The scoring system was also similar to Formula One, as one manufacturer could submit more than one movement, and each movement would get its own results, while the manufacturer would get its own scoring based on how all the movements performed. Much like the difference between a driver's and constructor's score in Formula One. In the 60s, Omega, Longines, Zenith, and Girard-Perregaux were some of the brands that ruled these competitions, but a brand from the Far East was planning on disrupting everything. That brand was Seiko, that already proved itself domestically by winning everything they could. In 1964, Seiko entered the competition for the first time with mechanical watches, and was simply demolished, with the best movement they entered placing 144th, and not a single movement was certified as an observatory chronometer. Instead of just giving up, they went back to Japan, determined to learn from their mistakes. And one of the mistakes they made was getting their movements slightly magnetized. So the following years, they not only transported the movements in anti-magnetic cases, but also chose routes as far from the poles of the Earth as possible. This shows just how obsessive Seiko was at getting better. Another testament of this obsession was the fact Seiko gave both its factories the freedom to participate in the competitions separately. Suwa factory that was in charge of making Grand Seikos, and Daini factory that was in charge of King Seikos, both designed and made their own competition movements. So next year, Seiko came back and managed to get 3 movements certified as observatory chronometers, with the best movement placing 114th, and Daini factory placing 6th overall in the manufacturer's ranking. In 1966, results were even better, with one of Daini movements placing 9th, and in the manufacturer's ranking, Daini rose to 3rd place while Suwa rose to 6th. 1967 was the year Japanese made the best official score for Seiko at Neuchatel, and made the Swiss scared for the first time, with Daini's best movements taking all the places from 4th all the way to 11th and 13th, while Suwa's best placing 12th. This moved both Seiko factories up in the manufacturer's category, with Daini placing 2nd and Suwa 3rd, while the first place was taken by Omega. And finally, we come to 1968, the year the Swiss showed what they're actually made of. Seiko entered the competition at Neuchatel as previous years, but this time only Suwa factory participated, while Daini sent their 45 movements I covered in my King Seiko video for certification. As the competition was moving on, Seiko's movements were starting to look like they might win, which made the Swiss do one of the most embarrassing moves in their history. They simply cancelled the competition while it was being held and told everyone to come back next year as they needed to reevaluate the rules. So basically, the Swiss acted like a 10-year-old losing a game of basketball in his own backyard, and simply stopping the game and sending the winning friends away because he doesn't want to play anymore. Even though the competitions were cancelled, The observatory later sent the accuracy results to manufacturers for their own movements, and the scores for SUA movements showed they made the second and third best score ever recorded in the history of the competition. But that is not where the story ends, as there was another competition being held at Geneva. And since the Japanese were already there in Switzerland with these competition-prepared movements, they simply entered that competition. Here, the movements completely demolished the Swiss by taking all the places from 4th all the way to 10th place. But unlike the year before, when the first 3 places were taken by the Swiss fair and square, this year the first 3 places were taken by Swiss quartz movements, showing that Swiss were ready to do anything just to stop Japanese from winning. And although officially, Seiko movements never placed better than 4th place, if we ignore the cheating quartz movements, it is clear Seiko dominated the competition by winning the first 7 places when it comes to mechanical watches. As expected, the Swiss cancelled all future chronometer competitions, making 1968 the last year competitions were held. It is pretty ironic when you think about it, as the Swiss used quartz to beat the Japanese at a competition, only to later be destroyed by Japanese using that very same technology. When I have to explain it to a non-watch person, I always make an analogy of boxing. If these competitions were a boxing match, quartz technology can be seen as a blade. In the last round of this boxing match, the Swiss, in a way, took out their Swiss Army knife and stabbed Seiko 3 times by taking 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place. Little did they know, Seiko had a katana by their side that they pulled out the following year and cut the Swiss's head off in one stroke. That katana was called Seiko Quartz Astron. So next time when you see someone blaming Seiko for ruining traditional watchmaking, just remember who played dirty first. Now, believe it or not, the chronometer competitions were actually revived in early 2009 with the rising popularity of mechanical watches. But instead of humbly apologizing to Seiko and inviting them to join the competition again, the Swiss showed they didn't change one bit by making a rule that only European-made watches from European-made parts can participate. That move, together with the historical "we can cancel the competition if we don't like the look of the winner," makes this resurrected competition a joke and robs it of any credibility it might have once had. I personally admire Seiko for taking the high ground and not using this part of history in their marketing to rain fire on the Swiss. I, however, doubt the Swiss would take this dignified path of keeping quiet about it if the roles were reversed. I have been planning on doing this video for ages, but would always get caught up into something else, so I'm glad I finally made it. I will leave the links to some excellent articles with incredible pictures I used in this video as well about this part of horological history, including the official Seiko Museum, if you want to dig deeper. I do hope you found this video interesting and enjoyable. If you did, please like and subscribe, and until the next video, bye.